Hi, I'm Mark Tucker,
Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg, and we are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs, going into a new year, Alan.
Oh, always looking forward to the new year because that means new stuff like what hopefully what we talked about in the last episode.
Yep,
Um, always looking forward to New Year's, new beginnings, new stuff.
yep,
And along with the new stuff, we talked about how you've been playing with widgets, you've been publishing some new widgets for Alexa.
yep.
And a couple of weeks ago, just before the new year, you published a YouTube video kind of laying the groundwork for widgets, shall we say.
Yeah, I'm. There's been enough people have asking about it, and you've told me that people have been asking about widgets, and I've wanted to talk about widgets, but we're kind of stuck in this period where it's a preview. There's only a handful of developers that are actively creating widgets, though the number of widgets in the widget store are have grown by at least 50% over the last couple of months. We're up to probably what 35-ish widgets at this time, and there could be more by the time this video's out. Um, and so I feel like there's interest and but I was trying to answer the question, what could I do today to get me ready for widgets as a developer? And that's kind of how I approached the video. And I came up with 8 things that we could do. Even if you don't have access to the documentation and all the preview stuff that I've been working on for the last 2 or 3 months, that there are things that you can do today that will help get you ready so that when that does happen, you can be, really quick into the widget gallery with your own widgets for the skills that you've got.
So we'll link to that video below. And I don't want us to go repeat all of them, but it certainly raised a whole bunch of issues that I had, and I'm sure other people have as well. Um, but kind of maybe the first place to start is exactly what is a widget in the Alexa world.
Oh, all right. So in the Alexa world, a widget is limited to Echo Show devices, and it's actually limited to a subset of Echo Show devices. So the main range of Echo devices that have a display from small to large would be an Echo Show 5, an Echo Show 8, an Echo Show 10, and an Echo Show 15. So that's kind of the range. There was the newer Spot, and there was the original Echo Show and Echo Show version 2, but we're going to kind of not worry about those for right now. And there's Spire TV that's got ability to accept APL. Um, but really the main ones that we care about are Echo Show 15, 8, and 10.
Okay.
Those are the ones that have widgets, and widgets are display devices that are associated with a skill, and they allow you to either get into the skill quickly, like with a button press, or more likely, it's going to surface content from your skill to tease people back into your skill. But the interesting thing is that a widget um, shows up in the widget gallery whether you have the skill enabled or not. So it could even be your first introduction into a skill.
Wait. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can install a widget without installing the skill.
Well, you can see the widget in the widget gallery even if you don't have the skill enabled.
Okay, let's take a step back. What's
Okay.
the widget gallery?
All right. All right. So widgets are little UI portions of a screen. On an Echo Show 15, there's actually a prominent place on the screen that's always there that will show up to 6 widgets at a time.
Takes up half the
Um,
screen, right?
Takes up basically half the screen or 2/3 of the screen. Um, and each of those widgets is associated with one skill.
Okay.
So now ask your question again.
Okay. So no, because that launches more questions.
Oh
Um,
no. Okay, go on.
so when you say each widget takes up some portion of the screen,
Yep.
What is it showing in there? Well, what does it show inside that?
Okay, so I'll walk through a couple of examples of some widgets. How's that?
Okay, that
So,
sounds good.
so there's a weather widget that Amazon puts out, and there's also an Alexa champion that has created an Alexa skill called Big Sky, which does weather. But on this weather widget, you could have information for your zip code that could show high and low temperatures, precipitation. So it could show, you know, some information on the screen, so you could glance and see what the weather was in your area. Then you
Okay.
also have the ability, if you so create this into your widget, the ability to launch the skill so that you could see a bigger version of that, you know, and hear more information. So it's kind of a small glimpse or a summary of some information or content that you've got in your skill that you want people to be able to see when they're outside of the skill experience. Even like walk by and glance and see it, or you know, so
So
it's
it's a portion of the screen that's displayed and updated and controlled by your skills somehow, and we'll get to that in a second.
yeah, and
And
it could be display only information or it could be interactive.
interactive in what sense?
You could scroll a list of things. You could
Oh,
select
okay.
an item in a list, which could then cause some action. You could click on a button, you know, tap a button on the screen, swipe a panel to go through certain list of things. There's interactivity. So you have carousels, you have lists, you have
Okay.
um,
And pressing a button can, I assume it can do stuff on inside the widget itself, but that's also what can launch the widget or launch the skill or send something to the skill.
yes. So there's basically, if
Okay.
you've got a button, it basically does three things. You could have a button that just does something in the APL, so it's all running local. There's something where you can, you know, tap a button or tap an item on the screen, and that could send something back to the back end, but it just updates something to the back end, but the widget is still there. Or the third option is that it could launch the skill, which then takes over the whole screen with the skill, and then when you exit the skill, then it goes back to the main kind of home screen of the device, and you see that split screen again with your kind of standard Echo Show screen on the left
Okay.
and your widgets on the right.
Okay. So you've now gotten another question out of me. But first I want to kind of follow up. And you said, so you said the second thing was that it could send something to a skill. And that's using the exact same mechanics that we currently have in place with events in a skill, correct?
So yeah, so APL has the ability to have buttons, and when you tap a button, it could do something just in the APL locally, or it could send a command, a send event that sends something to the skill code running in the cloud that does something. So that same thing's available for widgets as well.
Okay. Now, you've said this twice now, so I assume this is true. Um, the widget is just APL.
A widget is just APL. There's there's the like,
Okay.
how do you install or uninstall a widget? There's some stuff that goes along with that. There are some new components that came out with APL that supports widgets, that haven't been announced yet, but that will help you in your development of widgets. But in the end, it's still the same architecture of APL. So if you know APL today, then you're not going to be surprised about creating widgets. It's going to be the same thing.
Okay. So I'm willing to bet most people will, or many people will be confused by this because normally we associate APL as something that comes back with a directive as
Mm-hmm.
part of a skill. How are you? How do you? I don't know. How do you send this APL without a skill sending it? Is
Oh,
that's
yeah. I
where
don't
I'm
know.
confused.
Yeah, I don't know how much I can say on that end, but you need a skill in order to have a widget. So I can tell you what I did, for example, on some of my skills. Some of my widgets. I have like a magic ball, coin flip. Um, and so if you go into the Alexa skill store, you can find my skill called show widgets. That's the name of the skill. And if you actually say, Alexa, open show widgets, my skill, the only thing it does is gives you a message that says to install the widgets, find it in the widget gallery. So
Okay.
I so the skill has to be there, and the skill is involved with installing and uninstalling the widget. So any code that um, would be needed to install and install and uninstall to send those directives back still comes from the skill, but it's a section of the skill code that just has to do with widgets.
Okay. So it sounds like an event or something is triggered
Mm-hmm.
when you install a widget. Your webhook gets called with something
Yeah.
that, and it's expected to send back APL.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you similarly with a skill, when you enable a skill and disable a skill, then you get an event from Amazon, from Alexa saying, the skill's been enabled, the skill's been disabled. So it's similar in that same vein. It's just now additional ones specific to widgets.
Okay. Um, I'm sure I've got more questions there, which I will ask in a minute. But you've mentioned now a couple of times the widget gallery. What is the widget gallery?
Okay, so the widget gallery is the place where all of the widgets can be found. So if you're thinking of like a store paradigm, you go to the Alexa skill store to see all the skills that are available to enable. You go to the app store to see all the mobile apps that are allowed to be installed. You go to the widget gallery to see all the widgets that you're able to add to your device.
Okay. If you install a skill that has a widget, you still have to go to the widget gallery separately.
Yes, because what you're doing is you're saying, I want to install this widget on this device. And you could have that same widget installed on multiple devices in your same household. You could even potentially have the same widget installed multiple times on one device if you wanted to.
I can see why you would want to. That's obvious to me. How you do so? So really, in that case, all you do is go back to the widget gallery and say install again.
Yeah. And they'll say, oh, you already have it installed. Do you want to install another one? And you're like, yeah.
Okay, I guess that suggests. Well, I guess that suggests that there's a way to configure each individual widget and to tell the widgets apart inside their configuration. But I imagine you don't care. I mean, you don't need to know that you've got two running on a device because you, as the developer, don't care about that, right?
Well, I could. If I want the same experience, if I want every widget in the household to have exactly the same content and the same experience, then I don't care. I can just say update all the widgets. But I could care and say just update the content for this one widget,
Okay,
or just update the content for this other widget. So I
so
could conceptually have.
so widgets know what device they're running on?
Uh, do they know what device they're running on? It's more that when they get installed, they get a unique identifier. A widget gets a unique identifier. So then when you update the widget, you can say update the widget with this identifier.
Okay. So and so do you know which account installed the widget though?
Yeah,
Okay.
because this a skill has to be installed with an account,
Right.
and so
Well, hang on.
yeah,
Yes, a skill has to be installed with an account, but does a widget have to be installed with an account?
yes,
Okay. So if I get and when I install it, do I get that unique identifier?
Yes.
Okay. So I could say, hey, I know that Mark has installed this widget 3 times.
Yes.
Okay. And I can see uses for this. That was not, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a widget, which is a part of a new part of an Echo Show screen. Where's it? So where does it show? I know on the 15 you said that it takes up about half 2/3 of the screen.
Yeah.
What does the 8 and 10 do?
The 8 and the 10. So the place that a widget gets installed to when you say install this widget is, I've heard it called the widget panel, the favorites panel, the favorite widgets panel. I've heard it called multiple things, but it's where your installed widgets live. So this widget panel will either be in a permanent spot on the Echo Show 15 or on the 8 and the 10. You can swipe from the right and you'll see a panel come out that has your widgets on it.
Okay, that's disappointing, but okay.
Yeah, I've seen some examples, or at least there were some original ideas going around, a year ago, that there would be certain times where you could just be sitting there, and if the screen was idle, then maybe the widgets panel will just kind of fly out and give you a little peek about what's going on in there. I haven't seen that on my Echo Show 2, which is the only other device that I've got that would support widgets at this point. So I don't know if that's a limitation of the Echo Show version 2, or if they're still kind of trying to figure out that UX portion.
Okay, so we have something that will display things using APL.
Yep.
It displays it either in the widget panel, which may or may not be shown depending on what model you have. To install a new one, you go to the widget gallery. So
Yes.
far, so good. Oh, and they are connected to a skill, but in strange ways, it seems like. No, that's not a criticism. I
Yeah.
mean, they're attached to a skill, but you don't, the skill isn't necessarily doing anything. And
Well,
the
it could
skill,
be.
I mean,
Like
yeah.
I've got a skill called busy timers that I'm working on that allows you to add timers um, and give it a duration and a name and an optional emoji, and you can use that with a non-screen device. You can use it with an Echo Show device, and then there's a widget that goes along with it too that would show you the content. It's all the code is contained in my skill, and
Okay.
so the typical case is that you're adding widgets onto an existing skill, one or more widgets onto an existing skill to add functionality, and to support the widget functionality.
Okay. That makes some sense. Um, so one of the things though that I know has confused me for a long time when it comes to APL in general, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't confuse me even more now,
Okay.
is that there is no code in APL. So like when we think of a web page, we have, you know, a framework component, and that's the HTML. We have a rendering component, and that's the CSS, and we have a code component, and that's JavaScript.
Right.
And the three of them kind of work together in different ways to do everything that needs to be done. But when updates are done, it's usually the JavaScript that changes the DOM in HTML to render things differently. But you don't have that in APL.
Well, you kind of you kind of do and you kind of don't.
I,
So it's
I,
definitely there's definitely a portion of APL which is very akin to HTML. You've got even more
Right.
so,
No, no.
or like kind of newer frameworks, something like Vue or Angular that are componentized, and you can say this portion of the screen is this type of component, and I'm going to wire up data to this component. If you kind of think of like a single page application, then APL has a very spa feel to it, because there's a portion where you can say, here's my JSON data document that's associated with my APL document, and there's binding, and so you can repeat portions of your component tree based off of your data bindings, and it can pull values out.
I, I
So
I feel like that's the component that, or that's the element of APL that I feel like is least clear, or least clearly discussed. And I've only slowly started to wrap my head around it as I've looked into some of this more. So we say that APL is a clear map of HTML and CSS. It combines the two into its own language. I think what's less clear is that this data binding component is very similar to what you see in things like React and Vue and Angular.
yeah, right.
So that if you want to change something on the page in on the web, you would have JavaScript make those changes. In APL, what you would do is you would just change the data somehow.
Yeah, so you could change you can bind to original data, or you can update. So the parts that APL adds that kind of make it more, kind of pull more of the JavaScript type stuff into that kind of, trifecta of what you need to make an active UI, system, is that there are certain functions that you can call, which are very similar to JavaScript functions. There's a whole slew of math functions. So you can do random numbers, you can do ceiling, floor, and they're very akin to JavaScript. It's not JavaScript because you have to actually include these functions inside of the binding syntax. So there's a certain way to say this right here is like a data binding expression, and instead of just like show me this field from the data document, I want you to actually wrap that field by this function, and you've got ternary operators, so you've got some ability to do coding inside of this data binding.
Can you write your own functions?
You cannot.
Okay.
So
well, that's not
in
JavaScript.
addition to that, there's this ability to there's places where like every component has an on mount, that when that component is rendered on the screen, the on mount gets called. Or if you've got a
but
button,
what can on mount do?
There could be it could call commands now. So there's a list of commands that you can call. Like one of them would be set value. So you could say, I want you to set the I don't know, opacity value of component, text, a certain text component, to 0. So you can hide.
So basically, so you can say when you show one component, you make another component disappear, and vice versa. You have ways to do toggling and other. Okay, I get that, but again, that goes back to I think the thing that I feel like people will have the most trouble grasping is that it's all about manipulating the data. You've got a data object that you're manipulating in some ways, and depending on how you change that data object, what gets rendered will change.
Yes.
Good. Which leads to the next question of, and this is where the widgets come in, if you've got widgets, yes, I get you can change, but you can press a button and that'll change your data binding. But how do you get other data into it? Like on JavaScript, if I was doing this in JavaScript, my JavaScript function would periodically go check a weather site for data and update the local data components, and that would re-render things.
Okay. All right. Sure.
But you don't have that in APL or
Yeah.
widgets.
So in APL, you've got two main pieces. You've got the document itself, which is the APL with all of its code, its events, its commands, its bindings, it's all the stuff. And then you've got an initial data document that you can render. All
Okay.
right.
And I so this and this is the same as we get currently with skills, that they
Yeah,
can send
that
APL
part
and a
is
data
exactly
document.
the same. Now you'll want to watch the video because there is a portion where they're going to show you some additional like APL that could be used for something that's called the data store. Now the data store is actually like a mini database that is on the device that is related to a specific widget.
And by specific widget, we mean a widget by its ID.
Oh, I have to think. I would have to think through that again. But I would say, yes.
Okay.
Typically, I'd have to go back and see what kind of. I'd have to
I
scrutinize
won't
some
hold
of
you that one to it.
the
Okay.
context of that. But generally, the next part that you need to know is that you can take what was bound the old way, kind of static binding or binding at the time of render, and you can take that list, in this case, like busy timers is a list of timer objects. So I can take that list of timer objects out of the data structure that I've got today and put it into the data store. So what happens is that I could call some API call that would have some information in it that would say, this is what I want you to update the data store on the device with. So go
When
ahead.
you, in this case, when you say you can call some API, you
Yes.
mean like a server somewhere can call an API.
Some backend system
Oh,
could,
okay.
so you could have like some process that does something like maybe you've got some process that goes through. I don't know how the weather widget does this, but let's assume that maybe there's some place where there's a master list of everybody that has um, this widget installed and what the widget ID is. And they know what the zip code is for that particular widget. And so there could be some process that gets called once an hour, every 20 minutes, something that would go through and call an API call to update every one of those widgets. Um, yeah, it gets a little crazy. I don't know. I haven't done anything that complicated, so I don't know. There might be some tricks to it but in essence, you would call this API call that would update the data store for a widget, and that would automatically like refresh the data, and the binding that was already there to the data would now have the new data.
Okay. On one sense, that's cool
Yeah,
because that's something that is traditionally very hard to do, and that's essentially pushing data down to a local device.
yeah,
So that's really awesome, and it reminds me of a bunch of technologies like Firestore, for example.
yeah.
Um, on the other hand, that's a scaling nightmare.
It could be, depending on how you do it. Now, the most complicated that I have had is that I do that with an interaction with the skill. So like if I were to go into the skill and say add a new timer, then that
Right.
updates my user data store, and it also calls. I've got that the skill knows which widgets were installed for this skill and has a list of them, and so then it makes the API call and updates the widgets with a new list that includes the new timer that just got added.
Right. But I'm thinking of something like, my portfolio widget. If I want a constant updated number and stream,
Yeah.
throughout the day of how my portfolio is doing or how a particular stock is doing, that means it's pushing down that information every minute, every 5 minutes.
Yeah. And so
And it's
that's
doing that for how many people?
so that's um, where you have to plan out what your widget's going to do. Just because a widget could potentially do something, it may not be the right thing to do, or it may be cost prohibitive to do. So you kind of have to think about, you know, like I don't know how often the weather widget updates. That's kind of the best example that I've got of the existing widgets is the weather widget needs to be updated on a regular basis for a specific zip code. So I don't know how often that gets updated or how challenging that is or what thresholds there are for updating those values. So I don't have that experience, so I really can't talk to that. But you could, depending on the use case, you might say, well, a up to the minute stock, quote may not be feasible. I like a history, kind of like a something that's going to keep track of something over time may not be feasible. Updating your stock portfolio once an hour might be feasible to do in a widget. So you have to start thinking about how complicated or costly could it get, and what constraints will you run into when you design your widget, because
Yeah.
you could get yourself into a world of hurt depending on what you're trying to do.
Well, that's kind of what I'm worried about here
Yeah,
is unless they start issuing, well, and I guess the related question is there a rate limit on how often you call the API to push down an update?
there is. And so that's I think Amazon's covered themselves as far as that goes, but that might not be the user experience that you want to give, to your users. But I think there's enough functionality there that widgets have a huge upside to it.
Oh,
It's just that you may not be able to do these crazy things like a real time, something that you would do with like an event bus or something like that. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. Um, but periodically update data, yeah, you could do that.
well, for some definition of periodically, apparently.
Yeah,
I mean, again, whatever the rate limit is, how well does it scale? If you've got 1 million users, is the rate limit even going to let you send it to 1 million users, even if they're distributed evenly across a day? I don't know.
yeah.
And you're not going to tell me the rate limit.
Yeah. I don't know it off the top of my head, and I don't know what state it's currently in. If it's if they're
Yeah,
still negotiating that. So
that's, I don't know. Like I said, on the one hand, I think it's really, really awesome sounding, and I think it's a really impressive way to handle the issue.
yeah,
Um, but I worry about how well it scales. You're scaling a server process rather than scaling an API. I mean, like I said, the other way to do it is you put it completely on the client side, and your client JavaScript, hits an API every so often. And we know how to scale those, and we know how to limit those. Um, I guess we know how to limit a server process as well, but I worry what that does for the experience.
yeah. It'll be interesting to see how
Yeah.
that turns out.
Anyway, didn't mean to get too far in the weeds on that one. But no, I think the data binding notion is an interesting solution to this problem here. It's really
Yeah,
impressive to see. So okay, we've covered what widgets are. We've covered what the widget gallery is. We've talked about where widgets get displayed and how they're displayed, and we've talked about how they get updated.
right.
And we've talked about what they can do. Anything else?
Oh, let's see. And that you definitely need to learn APL. And there's a couple of links in the video that shows to a different video series that I did on APL. Alexa has also some new videos, courses that they put out. New course. I don't think it's actually video. A course on APL that you can follow. Definitely you want to create an account with APL Ninja, because that's going to allow you to create your APL, see what it looks like on a widget sized canvas, and interact with it and start playing with it. You can just start creating it using the data tab to add your data, and you can move the data that needs to go into a data store later after, but you can play with it and kind of design out and play with and get things going. You could, basically create most of your widget today with the tools that are out there.
Wow.
And then
sorry, that suddenly clicked that APL Ninja's already been updated with the widget sizings.
yes, has been
Wow.
for probably about a year. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, so you can create widget sized APL components today and start thinking through what your UI is going to look like and kind of how it functions, what the
And
functionality is.
since a widget sized and since a widget is just APL, you're building your widgets today.
Yeah, you're building your widgets today. There's going to be stuff that you have to add as far as like how do I install, update, and delete a widget, and how do I register a widget so that it shows up in the widget gallery. Kind of where's my metadata that's gives me the description of what the widget is, and any images that go along with that. So there's some other things that you'll have to add, but the main widget functionality you can create today.
Wow.
And
Okay.
start playing around with that, and at least mock it up with some fake data, static data, to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do and looking like you want. And then you'll just kind of do the last 20% when you actually get access to the widget
Okay.
documentation.
So people can get started with it today.
They can. There's no reason why they can't.
Very cool. Anything else?
No. I guess if you have questions, ask me, and I'll answer as much as I feel like I can, or I'll try to point you to something that's already out there publicly. Or if you want me to, you're kind of excited about what you're working on and want to send me a link to via APL Ninja, even a private link, I could take a peek at what you're doing and, give you some feedback if I think, something needs to be different. Part of it's going to be figuring out what the navigation paradigms are going to be. A simple one-page widget is pretty easy, but what if there's got to be multiple screens and some sort of interaction? What does that look like? And how do you really want to do that in a widget? Or in some cases, does it make sense? And most of it is just getting used to using widgets and seeing what's out there and seeing what UIs you like, and try to start figuring out what your user interface is going to be for your widgets.
So very cool. And I guess the final question is going to be, have they announced a date for it to be released yet, to go
No,
public?
I have
Okay.
I have no clue. I know
Okay.
that there are people that are making widgets, and I've got some more widget ideas that I'm working on. So in the coming weeks and months, I'll be creating some additional widgets. So just keep an eye out for anything that has Shazamble Design. That's my little one man side company that I do fun things like this with, and you can give me any feedback you want on the widgets that are out there, or ask questions, whatever you want.
Very cool. Looking forward to hearing more. And I'm sure, if people have questions, they can find you on Twitter, on LinkedIn,
Yep.
comments below, of course. And I look forward to discussing this more, both from feedback we get from people and when it finally goes live on Two Voice Devs.
Two voice devs. Take care, Alan.
Take care, Mark. Have a great week.
All right, you too.